June 3rd, 2025, the Kerch Strait, 4:13 a.m. The darkness is just lifting over the Crimean Bridge. But what is hiding beneath the water's surface right now? 4:44 a.m. A surveillance camera catches an explosion near one of the support pillars of the Crimean Bridge. From this footage alone, it's impossible to tell exactly what blew up. Only at 14:06 does Ukraine's security service make an official statement.
We never repeat ourselves.
Later, the head of the SBU clarifies that it wasn't one charge that went off, but two, 1,100 kilograms each. But then Putin's press secretary Peskov states,
Yes, there was indeed an explosion. Nothing was damaged. The bridge is working.
2,200 kilograms of explosives. That should have done the job. But just a few hours after the blasts, the bridge was back in operation. Over 2 tons of explosives, and the Kremlin says nothing happened. Why didn't the blast destroy the bridge? And why has Ukraine never tried to take it out again since, even though it's still carrying cars and trains? To understand that, you need to know what the Crimean Bridge has turned into over 3 years of war. This is our new series, Unclassified, where we break down military operations whose real impact only becomes clear over time, once the secrecy is lifted, or when we get our hands on exclusive material we can finally share. This is exactly one of those cases. So let's start with how this thing was defended, and how the Ukrainians cracked it. Let's go. The Crimean Bridge, Russia's new symbol. Here's how the Russians turned it into one of the most heavily fortified engineering structures on the planet.
Defending this bridge costs over $1 billion.
From the air, the bridge is protected by a multi-layered air defense system with overlapping ranges. Judging by this footage, during air raid alerts, powerful smoke generators kick in to hide the bridge from strike UAVs. Satellite images show anchored barges positioned along the entire length of the bridge on the water, along with several lines of protective boom barriers. Ship traffic is allowed strictly during daylight hours, and only along a designated route. So all night long, vessels sit at anchor in the roadstead. Patrolling of the surrounding waters and monitoring of the protective structures on the water happens around the clock. On the bridge itself, any photography or filming is strictly banned, and train passengers aren't even allowed to walk between carriages while crossing. The road and rail approaches to the bridge are guarded around the clock by Rosgvardia units. That creates massive traffic jams, especially now, with Russians trying to flee Crimea because of the blackout. But even under these conditions, the strict security protocol never changes. The defense of the Crimean Bridge is directly overseen by the director of Russia's FSB, Alexander Bortnikov. Putin appointed him personally. Hitting the bridge means hitting Putin's authority directly. So the attack on June 3rd, 2025 wasn't some easy walk in the park. It turned into a duel between the director of Russia's FSB and the head of Ukraine's SBU, Vasyl Malyuk, who personally ran the operation. So how did the Ukrainians break through every ring of defense?
On June 3rd, 2025, we broke through underwater.
During months of preparation, brand new uncrewed underwater vehicles were built, capable of moving right along the seabed. Their composite hulls are made of carbon fiber, so they barely reflect radar signals at all. And there's plenty of room inside to pack in explosives. Later, Ukrainian General Malyuk would say this marks a new era of naval warfare. But first, they had to prove it.
It wasn't easy.
After losing a huge chunk of the Black Sea Fleet and pulling their ships back to Novorossiysk, the Russians shifted their focus to aviation and radar. Planes and helicopters can spot surface drones visually and with thermal imaging. But underwater drones run several meters deep and leave no wake on the surface. What about satellites? Radar satellites can't see through water. Their signal just bounces off the surface. And optical satellites are limited by how murky the Black Sea is. On top of that, Russian satellites only pass over the Kerch Strait a few times a day. So, the distance from the nearest Ukrainian-controlled stretch of Black Sea coast to the Crimean Bridge is about 350 kilometers in a straight line. But judging by its technical specs, the underwater drone's range is way bigger than that. So on the way to the Crimean Bridge, The drones had plenty of room to maneuver around Russian patrol boats. And what if a patrol boat showed up out of nowhere? If a run-in was unavoidable, the tactic was simple. The drones shut down their engines and settled onto the muddy seabed, blending into the terrain in complete silence. Ukrainian drones run on autonomous obstacle avoidance algorithms based on data from onboard sensors. Here's how the system works in its final stage. Once it reaches the enemy's boom barriers, the first drone autonomously scans the obstacle, finds a gap right along the bottom, and slips silently under the nets straight toward its target. Up until that point, no underwater vehicle had ever pulled that off fully, autonomously. At 4:44 a.m., the first explosion goes off. But there's no evidence at all confirming that traffic was stopped right after the blast. What's more, there's no confirmation whatsoever that a second explosion even happened. So everything that comes next can only be pieced together from indirect clues that surfaced over time. Here's what we managed to dig up. According to monitoring data, the bridge wasn't actually closed until 6:07 a.m., which means nobody even noticed the first strike. Because the explosion happened at a depth of 19 meters, exactly the depth of the shipping channel. Then around 6 in the morning, the second explosion hit, and that's the one that got noticed, which is why the bridge was finally shut down. The commission that arrived on the bridge at 6:22 didn't record any damage to the main structure. The photos only show broken pieces of railing. Did the Russians actually understand what had happened? You'll find that out shortly. For now, let's keep going through the timeline. At 9 o'clock, traffic on the bridge was restored, though drivers complained that not all lanes were open. The commission likely kept investigating, but there's no evidence of that because of the strict ban on photography and filming. But on the flip side, this third attack was way less spectacular looking than the previous two. The real action was happening underwater, and what actually went down there only came out later. But what about effectiveness? All right, time to compare all three attacks and figure out why the Crimean Bridge is still standing, and why it's no longer target number 1. So, the previous attack happened in the summer of 2023. On the night of July 17th, 5 Sea Baby surface drones headed out for a meeting with the Crimean Bridge. According to the Ukrainian side, each one was carrying roughly 800 kilograms of explosives. In one of our previous videos, we covered how these drones sink Russian ships. We recommend checking that one out after this. But hitting a ship is one thing. Hitting the biggest bridge in Europe and the most heavily defended structure in the world is a whole different beast. So why did the Ukrainians go with this approach?
The thing is, we don't have enough missiles or powerful torpedoes to reach the bridge, and bombers simply can't fly that far, so we decided to build a new naval drone.
Ukrainians developed and tested these drones for months. A team of engineers and communication specialists, with help from volunteers, set up a dedicated autonomous comm system to control the boats over long distances. Nobody had any experience with this. Everything was being done for the first time. To find the weak spots, the intelligence services got their hands on detailed technical documentation of the bridge. And to find a gap in the bridge's defenses, the Ukrainians used footage shot by a Russian tourist who'd been vacationing on a yacht near the structure. You can only exploit a gap in the defense once, so there was zero room for error. Here's what we now know. The drones traveled through the dark in 2 groups for over 20 hours.
At that stage, we couldn't even think about sleeping or eating. We were completely focused on the operation.
The first group of 3 Sea Baby drones suddenly spotted the Russian frigate Admiral Essen, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. A juicy target all on its own. Because of an unplanned maneuver trying to catch up with the frigate, they burned through too much fuel, so that group of 3 drones could no longer reach the Crimean Bridge. All hope now rested on the second group. At 3:04 on July 17th, 2023, residents of the surrounding areas heard the first explosion coming from the bridge. At 3:20, a second explosion went off. Did both Sea Babies reach the target? At 4:20, the so-called head of occupied Crimea reported an emergency near Pillar 145 of the Crimean Bridge and urged people to avoid traveling. At 10 o'clock, Russia's National Anti-Terrorism Committee officially stated that at 3:05, 2 Ukrainian surface drones had attacked the Crimean Bridge. The result? Judging by photos and videos from witnesses, the Crimean Bridge suffered serious structural damage. One road span was completely torn off its supports and fell into the water. The span of the neighboring lane was badly deformed by the blast wave. It shifted sideways by several meters, but the structure held. Footage from the scene and satellite images captured major concrete chipping and cracks near the crossbeam that the spans were resting on. The rail bridge running parallel to the road bridge was also damaged. The blast wave destroyed part of the track and the protective structures. Though the full repair dragged on for almost 3 months, the bridge was actually back in operation just 6 hours after the blasts. Later, the head of the SBU confirmed the Crimean Bridge had been hit using experimental Sea Baby surface drones. This was the second successful attack. It had an effect, but not as big as the first one. But we already know General Malyuk never repeats himself. He's always hunting for a fresh way to reach the target. The first attack on the Crimean Bridge might just be the most original and unexpected military operation of the war. It's actually surprising the Ukrainian general revealed this secret at all. On October 8, 2022, at 5:52, a cargo truck pulls up to the traffic police checkpoint and the security control point before the entrance to the bridge. Inside the trailer, there's film wrap. Before this, that cargo had already traveled a massive distance. At 6:01, the truck inspection is done and the driver starts crossing the bridge toward the peninsula. At 6:07, a massive explosion hits. The fireball also engulfs a train hauling fuel tank cars on the rail section of the bridge. That footage flies around the entire world. The aftermath is genuinely stunning. The footage shows 2 full spans of the road section completely collapsed, with the neighboring lane badly damaged. 7 fuel tank cars from the train burned to nothing. The extreme heat from the burning fuel seriously damaged the rail bed and the steel structures. An equally big wave hits the information space. The Washington Post, citing a source, reports Ukrainian intelligence services' involvement in the Crimean Bridge blast. The New York Times, citing a senior Ukrainian official, reports that Ukraine's intelligence services used a bomb hidden inside the truck to carry out the blast. It was detonated while the vehicle was crossing the bridge. The full truth about the explosion only comes out a few months later, from the man who ran the operation, SBU head General Malyuk, who exclusively shared the boldest details of his plan with our journalists. According to the general, the explosives were hidden inside rolls of packaging film, with the thickness carefully picked so the cargo wouldn't raise any red flags during checks by the stationary scanners. The total charge was around 21 tons in TNT equivalent. The Russian inspector at the checkpoint walked up to the vehicle, asked the driver to open up the trailer, looked inside, and saw ordinary big commercial pallets loaded with rolls of film. He didn't suspect anything unusual and gave the order. The remote detonation was made possible thanks to an autonomous detonation system that got around the jammers running on the bridge. That's how they managed to trigger the blast at the exact moment the truck was level with the train carrying the fuel tank cars, to maximize the destruction. But even 21 tons of TNT equivalent didn't destroy the Crimean Bridge. In the first days after the blast, car and train traffic was limited to reversible single-lane mode. But on March 23, 2023, the Russian government officially announced the repair of all road spans was complete and full two-way traffic had been restored. So after every successful attack, each one requiring months of preparation, the Russians eventually got the bridge running again. Just took a while. So why don't the Ukrainians just keep going? If the first strike in October 2022 proved that Russia's main symbol of occupation was vulnerable and forced Russia to divert scarce AD systems to protect it, then after the second, in July 2023, naval drones permanently stripped the bridge of its role as a reliable road artery for heavy military logistics. Then the strike on the support pillars in June 2025 put the bridge's actual load-bearing structure itself at risk, sharply limiting its capacity and making resupply for Russian forces in Crimea even harder.
This bridge is basically condemned. The Russians can't use it for war.
Official confirmation of the Crimean Bridge's condemned state and its unusability for military purposes is right there in the regulations, orders, and statements from Russian government bodies themselves. All trucks weighing more than 1.5 tons are banned, loaded, or empty. Doesn't matter. As for rail traffic, no train carrying heavy tanks or self-propelled howitzers crosses the bridge anymore. To avoid triggering a collapse of the spans into the water, the bridge is closed off even to fuel tanker cars. The brutal fuel crisis currently gripping Crimea is proof of that. Even now, with every gas station on the peninsula bone dry, the Russians still don't dare send fuel trains across, and instead try to get it there some other way, by sea, for instance. But even there, the Ukrainians are running some wild operations. In one of our upcoming videos, we'll break down why Ukrainians don't sink Russian barges. They only set them on fire. Why is that? So subscribe to our channel so you don't miss it. Also, drop a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Or leave a comment about what you didn't like, or which other major event of the Russia-Ukraine war you'd like to see covered in our new unclassified format. Stay safe and support Ukraine.